Hello everyone, this is Mark Wilbur at tushua.com, and this is Phonics Friday number 7, where we learn how to be better teachers and help our students learn English phonics and English spelling patterns more quickly and more thoroughly. Today I'm going to talk about the NG or NK sound, and I think it's arguable that's the very hardest one, at least for all of my previous students, and I taught over 1,000 students in my 7 years in Taiwan. And as I said before on the feed, the last 4 years I was co-owner of an English school, and I was the one in charge of making the curriculum and training the teachers and working on the academic side of things. And in my experience, there are a lot of schools where everyone's phonics is terrible because they do things like have races in class to say words as quickly as possible while they're learning a given pattern, and that of course that leads to terrible pronunciation. But even at really good programs, like the last place where I worked before doing my own program, the guy running that, my old boss named Ron, he came up with a lot of the spelling rules that I'm teaching in this video series, and he had thought quite a bit about phonics, and he was very good about motivating the students, and so they had really good skills. But long after their R's were pretty good, they still had problems differentiating between NG sounds and N sounds. So when I made my own curriculum, I made a few adjustments, and I basically tried to give them a longer window of hearing them and doing listening drills to tell them apart before they had to say them. So basically I would have the NGs and NKs appear fairly early in their CDs and their homework. And when I first introduced it, I would draw on the whiteboard. Hopefully I can do this upside down here. I would try to draw a big face with an exaggeratedly large mouth. And let's see, nose, and okay, the rest there. And teeth. And I would have the tongue touching the top of the mouth near the back of the front teeth, like so. And I would put an N. Let's see, an N. It's harder to write upside down than draw upside down. An N next to it, and then I would draw another face next to it on the whiteboard, or actually the other side of the whiteboard. It would be the same, except it wouldn't have the tongue in there, and it would say NG. And I would quickly tell the students. Now at this point they were very low level, so I would just tell them in Chinese. I know some teachers feel you should never do that. I talked a bit more about that in Phonics Friday number 6 of why I think it is worth it. But in any case, within very, very little class time, I'd have this quick little sketch up, and I would tell them for an NG, the sound is in here. For an N, you've got to have your tongue up, so you have an N versus an and I would open my mouth so they could see like my tongue wasn't involved at all. And I would have like the N's written up here and the NG's written up here, and then I would say and make the students point. They should all point that way, since I put the N's over here, and then I would say and they have to point this way, and then I would do it faster. And I'd make all the students point at the same time. So if I say everyone has to point. If someone is kind of like hanging back and waiting to see what other students do and then following that, then I would call them by name and they would stand up and they would do it first, and then everyone else would point. But there's no punishment at all for getting anything wrong. It has no effect on the grades because, I mean, of course, I just taught something. I'm trying to get them to engage their mind and listen, and so it's not fair to evaluate them on it or punish them on it. Just make sure they all do it. Of course, if they wouldn't do it, then I would take points and my students all want points because I gave the top, about the top 40% of my students reduced homework if they had a lot of points. I'd say, you know, you're working hard, so I trust you to spend your study time how you want to. And they loved that, and that made them pay more attention and raise their hands more and like do all kinds of things to get extra points. Anyway, back to the N versus NG. After having them do it just with the versus then I would have them compare very similar word pairs, like seen versus sing, and I would say like sing, sing, and the students are all supposed to point that way because I have the NG up here. And then I might say like seen, and I have to go this way. And I would go through them, you know, pair by pair, like rang, rain, seen, sing, run, rung, ron, wrong, and make the students point. So the important thing is they were not making the sounds themselves, they were just listening and trying to tell which sound it was. After doing this in a couple of classes and having their listening homework, then I would start using it in oral spelling drills, and then the quizzes would be a few weeks later. So the way I handled the problem was I would just give them more listening time, more time trying to tell the sounds apart before I started having them use it, or doing any kind of evaluation that affected their grade on it. All right, let's go to the whiteboard. And this is how I would teach it. I would just go down the list with each of the vowels. So ang, there is no ang. I would point that out to students. There is no ang. Ing, ong, and ung. And then I would contrast these with the sounds that students usually would mix them up with. I can't say for sure that every place would be the same, but I think in general, like my students in Taiwan who are native Mandarin speakers had a lot of problems with ang and ain, ing and een, ong and on, ung and un. So with that drill I just explained, I would start out doing, you know, the exact same pair back and forth. So I'd have like rang or rain or fang or feign, and tell students to point whichever way they thought was right. And after everyone had made a decision and simultaneously, and I had said the word a few times, then I would give them the answer. So I would compare these two, then I would compare ing and een and ong and on, and then ung and un, and then I would just start saying words that had an ng or an n, but I wouldn't say which one. So, you know, I might have long, and then lean, and then fang, and then feign, and then seen, and then sung, and then song. So students would have to really listen hard for the ng. And after doing this whole drill, then I would tell them, you could have also just looked at my tongue to see if it was up or not, because I would always do this with my mouth open the very first time I did it, just to really reinforce to the students where the tongue goes. Okay, after this is covered, then I would tell the students you can't have an ng k. Anytime you hear like an ank, then it's actually just ank, and same deal with ink, onk, and unk. Once again, the reason for doing this contrast in the drill is because it's so hard. So just to give the students the very best possible chance of telling these sounds apart, I would start off with just the minimal difference. So they know they have either an ain or an ang coming, and they have to hear which one it is. Or they know it's going to be an on or an ong, they have to tell which one it is. And then I would gradually make it more difficult, and still just having the students point, not even making the sounds themselves. I think this is very important. There's actually a decent amount of second language acquisition research by linguists that deals with adult learners' accent, and this applies to children also, although obviously the younger you are, the better your accent tends to end up. And the long and the short of it is, if you spend a lot of time listening before you start speaking, you'll have a better accent. And there's an intense economic pressure, of course, if you're in English as a foreign language teacher, especially if you're teaching, really gung-ho Asian parents' kids. They want their kids speaking English with the foreigner as soon as possible. But this is kind of a degree thing. Obviously, I don't have my entire class silent, just listening to CDs and listening to me, show them picture cards and say, point to the cat, point to the car. Okay, now take the yellow car and move it around. I don't do that, of course, because it wouldn't be feasible. But I do make sure the students do listening drills before they do production. Even on the very first day of class, students will have to recognize every word I teach them before they have to say it. And they'll have to recognize the letter names before they say the letter names. And I think the more difficult the phonics point is, the more valuable it is to do more listening and recognition drills first. So that's why I do extra ones with the NG and NK sounds before going on to having the students do it. So first I do like the simple comparison where they know, just this pair, it's going to be one of them. Then I do the comparison where they know it's going to have an NG or it's going to have an N. And then after that I do the normal oral spelling drills where I start incorporating the NG words into spelling drills where I say words that students haven't heard before and they spell them out phonetically. And then finally, they've got it in their listening homework, and then finally after they've been doing all of this for maybe 3 weeks, then the NGs will start showing up on the oral spelling quizzes. So that's how I do this one, and it still doesn't make it easy, but I think it helps a bit. And to be clear, my previous boss's students were good at this. Like, it wasn't like he was letting anything fall through the cracks. Those kids had really good phonics at everything by the end. This is just the one sound that I found the most difficult for my students, so I pushed it even earlier in the curriculum and spent a bit more time on it. That's all for today. I'll see you next Friday with more phonics.